lost souls in the abyss of spirituality. We found each other in the abyss of the soul, both stuck in that black hole, the worst of all, a bog of no escape, a swamp of wet sentimentality, a well of feelings without any end or bottom to its darkness, the most hopeless and incurable of prisons. But in those black depths of utter darkness, there is that which keeps us going and alive, in different dimensions in another better world, of sensitivity, prolonged antennas, extra strange phenomena, like vertigo existence out of normal order and our bodies, telepathic qualities and other weird stuff just for freaks, which makes us freer, actually, in this our prison of the soul, than all those who are bound by opposite impediments, like property, a house and car and junk and practical responsibilities, that fetter them to the most desperate of chain gangs called mortality, which is the ignorant majority of all this miserable poor humanity. So what have we then to complain about? As outsiders, we are completely free from this outrageous mortal coil, and in this perfect liberty, which gives us wings, we can just go on flying and forever and together. Reunion. Our difficulty is not with ourselves, but with this alien world of ignorance, which fails to see and recognize the obvious, all the beauty, sensitivity, nobility of soul and mind, all the refinement which you can turn life into a work of art with, if you only leave barbarity and coarseness, rudeness and vulgarity behind with all destructiveness, and live for love alone with its constructiveness. It pains my heart to see you suffer in this climate of a barren Nordic stale and hard mentality, for your so tender heart of gold that easily cries blood can never be adjusted to this grey society of stony hearts that hide behind a mask of an infallible bureaucracy that never can do any people any good. But take it as a challenge. We can make this desert flourish if we only stick to love and use it well. Poetry enthroned. There is no need for any other law than poetry. Make her the queen of all existence in her everlasting glory, that must outlast all that junk called vanity and ugliness, which only show up in this world to pester and pollute it, for no other good than tragedy, the trap which all humanity so enthusiastically marches into, fooled by the deceivers of short-sightedness and fickle profit, for which sake man drowns himself in any madness and insanity most willingly, and hardly sees himself through even afterwards. But poetry remains, with beauty and idealism as champions. The last romantic hero isn't even born yet and shall never be, for they belong to poetry's and beauty's court of everlasting light, and can't be even tempted from the sovereignty to step down, to follow suit with this demented, ugly, sick, and decayed world, which politicians think they rule, unable to get into their thick heads that politics is nothing but the madness greenhouse of megalomania, where there are no other masters running the asylum than the vainest power of them all, the ultimately and completely egoistic opportunist's self-destructiveness. Simplicity. It couldn't be more simple. Yes, of course I love you, but I am a giver only and no taker. All I want is nothing for myself, but everything for you. And since your health condition is so delicate, I will not ever risk to jeopardize it, but protect it only. So my answer to your question of what I expect is nothing for my own part. As an artist bent on one-sided creativeness, it is excluded that I would desire anything from you except perhaps the wish that you would keep what I would give you. See my poems as documentations of my feelings, a tempestuous inner world that ever moves and changes, but which never gets out of control. And of my love, of course, which is quite undeniable, but of a rather purely altruistic kind, that never can get negative, destructive, morbid, or insane, but is, I am afraid, a rather hopeless case of one-sided constructiveness. Woodstock in retrospect after 37 years. It was all a craze, of course, a most absurd idea of most immoderate proportions, a phantasmagoria of surrealistic recklessness, to stage this concert of megalomania for an audience of 500,000, all well fed with food and drink and any drugs for half a week, with children getting born during the concert and some others dying, everything allowed, the music being anything and perfectly without self-criticism. And still there was something spectacularly sane about this whole flipped-out event. So many people gathered just for music's sake to be together in a ruse, intoxicated like on something so out of the ordinary as a common trip, to never really get completely back again, and for a number of them never to recover. None of us was there, and still it feels today as if it was but yesterday, and as a great historical concern for all of us, not 37 years away, but recently, and in that omnipresent zone of timelessness that you are constantly in touch with as a practicing musician. The idea was very good, no matter how it sounded, and whatever were the consequences. On the sea of love, are you the victim of the ocean, or are you the ocean? All your feelings are your own, but they will blow you anywhere, without your being able to resist them, although you, as their possessor, are alone entirely responsible for them. So, are you the wind that blows, or are you the skipper of the tossed ship that sets the sails to how the wind blows, risking shipwreck on the way, and without knowing whether you will ever reach a port? The wind is yours, the ship is yours. Just keep afloat, enjoy the wind and keep it going, and at least you won't lack any entertainment on a sea that tends to get the funnier the more outrageously you keep on blowing. Exhaustion. Where do they all come from, all these tiring, wasted wrecks of wretches who exhaust you by their extremism, the limbo people without roots and aims, who only live for their eccentricism, as if life's only meaning was excessiveness, at any cost, by any means, whatever the results, and they ignore completely that they leave you wasted in the ditch as they have passed you by and driven you completely over by their wastefulness of energy, of nonsense, of big deals for nothing, of their hopelessly excessive vanity inflation. Of their hopelessly excessive vanity inflation. But the other people, those who are more normal, can't you stick with them, who for a change are sensible? They are not easily accessible, since they are usually at work, and are not seen at home except late in the evening, when as burnt-out cases they arrive, and early in the morning when they have to go to work without much rest. and having usually endured a night of nightmares or insomnia, those, the normal people, are not much to celebrate, since they are generally boring, and thus don't you have much else than all those extremists who loiter without work and just keep on exhausting you with their relentless pathos, being better than the others in at least that they are never boring. The wrecker. My love is an incessant stormy ocean that keeps beating me asunder from my wits, a shipwrecked fool completely lost at sea and tossed to madness by its hammering atrocity. And as a lover you are hopelessly alone with this too overwhelming darkness of a cruel night, your feelings drowning you and pulling you straight to perdition. Yet you are alive and can still fight for your survival, even if you as a forlorn lover are completely on your own and have no mercy to expect from anyone. A lover lost is worse off than a ruined pauper. Still there is a plank left of your shipwreck, one last hope, if even that is the last straw, and even if that only is your own imagination. Passion. When passion comes and takes you from behind, what can you do? You have no other choice but to succumb to its relentless wildness, darkness, terror, and destruction, and must be the victim of your own emotions, overwhelming you with hopelessness and no escape, no possibility for any shadow of defense. For passion is the ultimate manifestation of the darkest force of nature, in her greatest irresistibility and her omnipotence, her majesty and dreadfulness of silence like of death. And yet in this black hole of hopelessness there is a kind of life, more tough in its expansion than the most victorious sperm, triumphant in its life and glorious in outbreak. So what can we do about the force of passion? There is nothing else to do but just the best of it. The haunted humanity. The ghosts that haunt you are the spectres of this insane world and age, the phantoms of derailment and the enemies of love that make spontaneous love impossible and keep us fettered in Orwellian restrictions, isolated in unhuman cubicles of so-called work and duties that are just one way to the asylum, made more comfortable by the horrors of medicinal society that give you pills to poison you, relieving you of life, which anyway is just unbearable because of this society. They say we are too many people on this earth, and therefore the majority expects a sudden instantaneous destruction that would finish off the sick majority which only suffers anyway. And thus the thoughts and speculations of this world continue to get sicker. There is only one health sign remaining. Love can never get corrupted while it lives and keeps on loving. Never mind about the children and forget about your sex life if the health state or the world demands such sacrifices for the sake of humankind's survival. But let never go of love. It is for us to cherish as the only thing that ever will continue keeping us alive.